I feel like the American dream has probably shifted a little bit in the past, decade, couple of decades, maybe even a generation or so. It's no longer necessarily the white picket fence and things like that, but it also may seem unattainable for a lot of people. We're going to take a deeper dive into that here on this episode of Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short, the father-son team behind Welcome Home Financial Partners. You can find them online at welcomehomefp.com. It's right there in the podcast description. Made that real easy for you. You can just click on through, set up a time to speak with them. My name is Chris Swan, and I'm pleased to be joined, as always, by Ralph and Tim Short. Gentlemen, always a pleasure. How are you doing today?
Doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. The American dream, I think, was Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman, the white picket fence, the 2 3/4 kids. I never understood the fraction of a kid, but it is what it is. As I mentioned at the beginning, I think it shifted a little bit, but it does seem out of reach for a lot of people. What is stopping people from achieving the American dream? There's a new poll by YouGov that found the cost of living and housing are at the top of that list, rounding out the top 5, healthcare and taxes, which could always honestly move up to number 1 at some point for people. Why is this happening? And is there anything that can be done to keep that from really hampering people when it comes to their retirement?
Oh, absolutely. There are ways to mitigate some of these issues. And I think what people are missing the most is that they aren't preparing, and they're not preparing soon enough, right? When we're 20 years old and we're still bulletproof and 10 foot tall, right. And hey, we're going to work another 30, 40, maybe even 50 years. And hey, I can do this later. I can do this later. Well, the fact of the matter is, the sooner you start, the less it's going to come out of your pocket in order to plan for retirement. So we know that, the housing market's out of control. The rental market's out of control. There's a lot of young folks, whether they're 20, 30 years old, that just can't afford to live normally like we did when we were younger, just because everything has gotten so expensive. But taxes, in my opinion, are one of the things that's most often overlooked, because everybody, while they're saving for retirement, what they're doing is they're just funneling all the money into their employer plan, 401k, 403b, TSP, whatever you want to chalk it up to be. And they aren't taking into account that, hey, maybe there's other options out there to mitigate taxes once you hit retirement, right? Most folks that we talk to, all they ever do is talk about taxes, come April, because that's when they feel the burn, whether they have to pay the government more money or they get money back.
Right.
And they're having their taxes come out of their paycheck. So it's kind of the outside out of mind, no harm, no foul, right? But nobody's going to be able to say no to taxes, so to speak. So you've got to make sure that you've got the proper plan. And why wait till you're 1 foot out of your employer's door to say, hey, maybe it's time to start planning for retirement? Because at that point, some of these tax efficient strategies might not work anymore. Or if they do work, it's going to take way more time. And hey, if you leave work when you're 60 years old, we're never guaranteed tomorrow, right? So if some of these tax strategies take years to work, you might not be able to reap the fruits of your labor.
One thing I would say, Chris, if you were talking about 20s and 30-year-olds, so let me just go back a few years for me, because if you think it's bad now, back when I was in my 20s and interest rates for your mortgage was 15 to 16% versus what it is today, things change over time. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not so good. So just understand, you have to worry and plan for things you got control over. We cannot control what the economy is going to be. We cannot control what inflation is going to be. What we can do is control our reaction to what we're trying to accomplish. And that's the only thing that you do have control. And that's what I tell my clients. I said, I worry about things I have control over, so I don't have too many worries in the world. So, but what you do need to do is understand you need to have a plan. Whatever it is, you need to have a plan. Whatever your goal is, whenever you want to retire, because there's a lot of people that come in and they want to retire at age 55 or 60 without understanding the ramifications of tax laws and tax strategies. Because guess what? If you start taking money out of your retirement accounts before 59 and a half, or maybe age 55 with certain situations, you're going to pay a penalty for doing that because of the government rules and regulations. So those are some things that we sit down with people as fiduciaries and make sure they understand. If you're going to retire early, this is what's going to happen to you. You need to take that in consideration. I just had a lady come in last night because her boyfriend had recommended to her to come in, and we were talking about her situation, and then we were looking at her tax strategy as far as thinking about moving some of her traditional 401ks, maybe some Roth conversion.
Mm-hmm.
And I basically said to her, I said, you need to make sure you don't pull too much money out of there so it takes you up into the next tax bracket.
Right.
And nobody had ever heard anything about that before or told her anything about that before. And she said, oh, by the way, my boyfriend really needs to see you since he's your client right now because he lost his job and he is not going to have as much money coming in this year. And I think based on what you're saying, it's probably a good time to start thinking about taking some of that traditional money and turning it into Roth because now he's in a lower tax bracket. It's not going to hit him so bad. So what is going to be 10 years from now, the tax brackets, we don't know. But right now, you need to take a serious consideration about what you're planning for, whether it's retirement, whether it's income planning. Take a look at what you're wanting to do, and let's sit down as a fiduciary and get this plan done for you.
Because it's not just about market volatility that can affect your nest egg and your bottom line. Obviously, taxes, what you pay out to Uncle Sam, once that money's gone, that money is not coming back. A market, perhaps it'll rebound and you'll be okay. Heading into 2025, prior to the election, we had spoken many times here on this podcast, and I know you guys speak very often, in the offices about the tax provision in Jobs Act, the Trump tax cuts, how they were due to sunset in 2025. And so you guys have been talking about, while taxes are as low as they are, taking advantage of those rates, using it to your advantage. With Trump winning again, he has made every indication that he wants to extend those tax cuts. Will that happen? All signs seem to point to yes, but again, we don't know that for sure. There are people out there who says he wants to make them permanent. I don't know about that because last I checked, we are currently $36 trillion in national debt, and that keeps going up. That money does have to come from somewhere. And unfortunately, all signs seem to point to taxes. So yes, Tim, as you mentioned, if you've got time on your side, the sooner the better to take advantage of these. And my favorite saying, the best time to plant an oak tree 20 years ago, the second best time.
And I think it's important to point out, too, is that achieving the American dream means different things to different people, right? Like your American dream could just be, hey, I just want to stay home and relax. And now life is on my terms, not anybody else's. Mm-hmm. Whereas somebody else could want to go on one of those, 2-year straight cruises, which to me is crazy. But
it's a lot of time on a boat.
It is a lot of time on a boat. I don't know how all that works, but we won't go there. I think people get so nervous about, keeping up with the Joneses or, hey, my brother-in-law or my neighbor are doing these things. It's all about what you want to do, right? What's your American dream? Your American dream is going to be different than my American dream, so on and so forth. The next person that walks in the door. So what it means for your American dream is going to kind of determine your planning, mm-hmm. right? So if we need, I don't know what the 365-day cruise costs, but, if that's $10,000 a month, well, we know we're going to have to plan for that. Whereas if you just want to relax and do things on your own terms, maybe you don't need $10,000. So that's important to point out because the American dream, I think years and decades and generations ago was a little bit different than it is now. Mm-hmm. But without you knowing what you want to accomplish in your retirement years and not knowing what you need to accomplish that American dream, don't kick the can down the road. And we see it happen so often as, hey, I'm going to wait for the market to rebound, or I'm going to wait to get to X amount of dollars, or, hey, this stock fell and I want to make sure it gets back to that price before I sell. There's a lot of things that you can get in your own way.
And I would say to most people, you need to understand that your financial security doesn't come with instructions, and it is all dependent upon you. You have to take the time, because that's one of the things that does frustrate us, is that sometimes your plan is more important to us than it is to you. And I think that's kind of backwards, because you should know where you want to be and take the time to get that as a priority. Get it set in place, because guess what? Your financial security depends on what you do, not what we do, what you do.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out, too, that there are tax-efficient withdrawals. There are ways to take distributions at certain times to try to minimize your taxation. RMDs, and we see this a lot more now recently, is there's a lot of people that have pre-tax accounts. They're like, you know what, I don't want to take this out. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to be penalized if you don't. So
and then you have to take
everybody, right. So everybody is focusing in on, hey, let's just build, let's save, let's do this. Well, if your RMD on your account, if your required minimum distribution on your account is going to be $100,000 for 1 year, why don't we take out distributions before then, mm-hmm. right? So depending on your tax rates, depending on your income, that's what taxes are going to be based off of. But there are different strategies, and people, when they get into retirement, they're just worried about their investments. And it's like, well, hey, we got to walk that balance of how do we make it more tax efficient? Because if it's all pre-tax, we don't want to have a $100,000 RMD to add on to the rest of our income.
Right. And you mentioned earlier, people are so focused on the April taxes that they owe, or, they'll get a refund on. And that is based on the calendar year prior. That is looking in the rearview mirror. What we want to talk about, because that's as important, if not more important, is looking forward. What are you going to be paying on taxes for the next 20, 30 years in retirement? How can we minimize the effects of that? Take advantage of the tax cuts as they stand right now. Perhaps it is using Roth conversions. Perhaps, again, it's not as simple as converting everything all at once. That's counterintuitive if you're going to be paying taxes on one large balance, pushing you into a higher bracket. But being methodical about it, it is part of that planning process. It is part of what what Ralph and Tim Short do, and the team at Welcome Home Financial Partners does. And it all begins with a conversation with them, reaching out to them. You can go to welcomehomefp.com, find out more about Ralph and Tim. The First Friday events, if you want to meet them in a more informal setting rather than the offices, although it's not super formal by any means. It is a casual conversation. But however you want to do that, the name of the show is Aspire to Retire. I think that's part of the American dream. Everyone out there does aspire to retire, and with a proper plan in place, hopefully make those dreams into a reality. Go to welcomehomefp.com, set up that time, and they look forward to speaking with you, just as we look forward to talking with you again on the next episode of Aspire to Retire with Ralph and Tim Short. Appreciate you joining us today. Ralph, Tim, appreciate you guys as always. And as we wrap up here, I want to leave you with the final word.
Thank you, Chris. And I think, everybody has their own American dream, and we would love to find out what that American dream looks like and help you achieve that. So if it comes down to, tax efficient withdrawals or different tax strategies, or just simply, hey, where am I at and where do I need to be? We'd love the opportunity for you to come into the office, and we'll have those conversations, whether you want to meet us, like you said, Chris, at an informal event or whatnot. Visit our website, give us a call. We'd love the opportunity. Thanks again for listening. Take care.
All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decision, nor is it intended to be a projection of current or future performance or indication or future results. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Welcome Home Financial Partners and Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness, and does not purport to a complete analysis of the materials discussed. All information and ideas should be discussed in detail with your individual advisor prior to the implementation. Each individual investor's situation is different, and any ideas provided may not be appropriate for your particular circumstance. Advisor services are offered by Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor in the state of Virginia. Being registered as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. Insurance products and services are offered through WPI Holding, Virginia Insurance License Number 138509, an affiliated company. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell or offer to sell advisory services to any resident of any state other than the state of Virginia or where otherwise legally permitted. Welcome Home Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Welcome Home Financial Partners are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency.